Welcome back to Discovery Bay in Planet Coaster, where I am building my Spanish themed area which contains a Gerstlauer Bobsled coaster, and in today's video we're going to be making some general improvements around this area. There's no main thing that we work on really, there's lots of small things, so I will leave timestamps as always at the bottom so I can split this video up into different parts of the different things we'll work around. But yeah, there's a lot of progress that needs to be done, and that's what we were doing in this video. But specifically we are working around the final section of the ride, which includes a mid-course brake run, a turnaround, and then the final brakes. But now we're working on a hole in the wall, and I added this to add a bit more interaction around the ride and the paths in this area, because there is a valley between two airtime hills at this part of the ride, and I thought it would be good if guests could somehow overlook this, and that's why I've done this here. So you can just see the archer there, of course, for scale. And yeah, we've used these TMTK items a lot to make the edges of the walls, but for the interior we're using temple blocks, I believe, or temple trims decorations, because they have that quite nice rustic feel, I guess. They look sort of worn out, which I guess is what the inside of this wall would be, because I'm kind of imagining that this is the cross section of the wall as it's just worn away over time, and it's kind of bits are broken off, and you can just see like little bits of rubble that are still there. And again, I'm putting some wooden beams in. I'm not sure if they would have wooden beams in walls, but I don't see why they couldn't. And then again, of course, here there's some tiles, and I'm imagining that these tiles fell off the roof on top of this wall, and yeah, that's what's going on there. But now we're going to be working on another hole in the wall, and this is a bit more crucial because the coaster, of course, does go literally through the wall, or at least it would if the wall continued its full form. So this is like a near miss element, and I think it's quite a cool way to finish the ride just before it hops up into those brakes. So this is a very similar process to what you've already seen me do, but of course this one, I guess it's a bit more exciting because it's got the track going through it, so it just feels, I'm not sure, it just feels different, and honestly I felt like I enjoyed building this one more for some reason. I think it could look better because of the way these bricks look, like they're very pointy and almost rectangular, but there was not really too much I could do with the TMTK pieces, because if I wanted to have them smooth it would take away from the texture effect, how all of the bricks are always parallel with one another. So I think it looks fine, and to remove the emphasis on the sharpness of these jagged edges, putting little bits of bricks and ruins in between, it kind of takes that away. And there's another ridge there that I've got. Just these are basically pieces that I would imagine to have fallen off if the roller coaster crashed through the wall, and there's not really going to be any reason given for why this wall's fallen apart as part of the story, because, you know, at the end of the day it's a roller coaster. It's not exactly going to be a realistic thing for some mystical roller coaster to come crashing through a building. But yeah, I still think that's it. Basically the theme for the area is that it's havoc around this farm, and you experience that havoc as you ride the roller coaster itself. But moving on now, you can see that the plaster pieces have been put underneath the layer of brick, and for some reason I felt like it would have looked good to have different layers of this brick, and there is a layer underground which is just plaster and a few bits of wood to reinforce that, basically the foundations for the wall. But because there is of course going to have to be a trench here where the ride gets very close to the ground, the foundations for that basically become visible, and that's my reasoning behind that. And now we are working on this turnaround, and this is going to be where the video takes us for a bit of time now. You can see that originally I just had ropes going all the way around, but then I changed my mind and decided to, well, I've still kept them in, but I'm putting some walls around the bottom now, and you can see here that at least on this side of the turnaround the walls completely replace the rope fences, and obviously it's going to come close to the path, so there's going to need to be some kind of netting to protect the guests, because that's just realism really. And you can see here that I actually add a bit of an orange trim to this pillar piece, and that's just so that it gives a consistent vibe of the same colour scheme for the whole area. So you'll see that a bit later on as well. Some of the other different temple trims, I paint them orange so that it's just more consistent. You will have noticed as well here that I used Baroque pillars to cover up the wooden posts that the nets are bound upon, and I just felt that the wooden post didn't really fit the Spanish theme, because there's quite a lot of stone involved and lots of plaster, you know, in these kind of Spanish villa pieces, because wood would probably not last as long in the heat, I'm not really sure, and I guess it would be reflected more with the lighter colour of the stone maybe. I'm not too sure, I'm just clutching at straws there really, but I just didn't think that having a wooden post didn't look good enough. Like I felt like I needed more, but I'm still happy that how the ropes are in between. I didn't want to just go with a fully fledged safety net, because it kind of takes a bit away from the atmosphere and the immersion of the area. But we're moving on now to some custom supports. You just saw me do one there very quickly, but we're now going to be doing some supports on this mid-course brake run, which goes directly over one of the entrances into the walled garden area, and that's where the entrance of the ride is going to be. And we will be building the queue and entrance in a few episodes. I don't think it'll be next episode, maybe even not the one after either, but we will get to that eventually. And I've got plenty of ideas for the queue line. I've actually planned out where it's going to go, because I was building like a rough plan for this area with grid pieces, and whilst I was doing that I was planning out where the queue line was going to go. So I can't wait to start building the queue line, but I'm going to take this one step at a time, not rush ahead, and address each area as it appears so that I don't have any gaps. I just want to go fully detail with everything, if that makes sense. And again, some more custom supports here. We're using the Gerstlauer connector, which was a TMTK item, and this piece looks really good because it's just, well, you know, it says in the name Gerstlauer Tube Connector 2 or whatever its actual name is on the workshop. It's an identical copy of how Gerstlauer connectors are supposed to be, so it just looks really accurate to how it's supposed to in real life. And now we're working on a spiral staircase, and before you say anything, I know that there is a TMTK staircase on the workshop, but it didn't exactly fit the way I wanted it to, so I decided to make my own one out of beams. And you can see here that to do this I rotated it round to make a full circle, and then used the advanced move tool to try and get the gaps to be fairly even. And honestly, I think this looks quite good, and I was expecting it to be a lot more difficult than it was. You can see here again that I'm making like some kind of fence just for extra safety, and I thought that this would be really horrible to do, but in the end it really wasn't that bad. Like, this is the worst part that I thought would happen. These white bits, well, I paint them white soon. Yeah, like the cross ties of the fence, they come across, but in the end it wasn't too bad. It's very similar to how I was doing the custom cross ties, so I felt like I'm quite experienced with putting these kind of beams into place, crossing between 2 different posts. And we're now going to make the rest of this catwalk, which leads all the way back to the final brake run. Yeah, it's just a bit of realism so that all of the mid-course brake runs are going to be accessible for staff, because if there's going to be a catwalk alongside it, there's no point in that catwalk being there if you can't reach it. So yeah, we're using some wood pieces, actually some wooden planks, to make the catwalk, but we've gone over the top with the same beam fences, just so that it kind of mixes in the rustic theme with the wood, but also makes it seem realistic to an extent. And that's why I've got the sanded beam fences here, so it looks realistic but still somewhat immersive at the same time, which is why the catwalk base is made out of wood. And we're now making a staircase now here. I just thought it would look cool to have a stair leading down to this ride area. And you saw that I placed a wooden pole plank pillar there at 45 degrees, and whenever I'm building custom staircases I always do that, just to make sure that there's a consistent gap between each step, and it just really helps to make the staircase look smooth and consistent, I guess, so that there's no dodgy bits and jagged edges. It just goes down all smoothly. And now we are going to be custom supporting these catwalks. I just put some iron girders underneath, and yeah, there's not much to say about this really, it's kind of obvious what it is. But we do actually go ahead to remove one part of this catwalk, as you can see just there, and then I remove the previous patio piece along, because it just kind of made my job a bit easier, and I didn't really know what I would put in the gap underneath the brake run, so I thought it would just make sense to keep the patio going. And then I'm using some grid pieces here. These are just because I used them before and I had no problems, and then we make this trim orange so that it looks fine, you know, I mean not fine, so that it matches up with the same orange theme of the whole area. It's a very orange area so far. And then again, we're using these pillars and foundation columns, and again the netting, so we're using some very similar pieces here, just so the whole area feels very coherent and consistent. I feel like I've said consistent a lot, but I think consistency is important, because when you're making an area you want it to feel like it's all the same area, and then when you go to a different area of the park, all of these common things that are used will be completely different, so you know you're in a different area, and it really helps to change the immersion between areas when you walk across to a different area of the park. And yeah, there are a few more custom supports there, just custom supporting now underneath the brake run. Quite simple stuff really. As the train comes past on the time-lapse, obviously it comes past really quickly, you will notice that because we use train swap to make it look like a Gerstlauer Bobsled car, the wheels are inside the track instead of around it, and that means that there's quite a lot of clipping. It doesn't look ideal. You'll definitely be able to see it in the cinematics at the end of this video, but to make it look like a bobsled, I don't really think there's much more we could have done, because honestly I think there isn't enough family coaster models in Planet Coaster, and that means that in Discovery Bay as a whole, most of the coasters that are already here are thrill coasters, if not all of them. So we needed more family rides, and because I thought the bobsled coaster was quite a versatile model, it would be cool to have this in. So that's why we've gone for this coaster type, even though it doesn't look completely realistic. But I think it looks fine, and you don't really notice the clipping too much. Like, I don't. Some of you may not have even noticed it so far, and if not, then I guess I'm right. But yeah, that's just my reasoning and my explanation behind that, because I kind of wanted to address that issue because it could look a bit strange for some of you, and maybe some of you even thought that I didn't have a clue that it was clipping, and yeah, I am aware. It is what it is, I guess. Anyway, there's some coaster opinions on the floor, and that's the end of the video. Enjoy the cinematics, guys. Goodbye.
Buckle up, it's a trail ride.